Good evening, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm not going to really start the meeting off, Tom is, but there's something that I just want to say. On behalf of the Village of Waterford and the Town of Waterford, we would like to express our condolences on the passing of the President of the Village of Rochester, Ed Sharp. We felt it was important to send our acknowledgement to him and his family and the residents of Rochester at this difficult time. I sit in a different seat. Ed was my father-in-law, and I just want to share that a big reason I sit on the village board in Waterford is his inspiration and his leadership that he's shown to this community in the greater Waterford area. It does not go unnoticed to this community what Ed and the Chart family have done for Rochester and the village and town of Waterford and the county as a whole. So just ask that you keep his family, the Charts, and the village of Rochester and the greater Waterford area in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this community listening session for the Waterford Cooperative Boundary Plan. We appreciate you all taking time out of your evening to be here with us tonight and are looking forward to hearing from you as we go through the evening. My name is Tom Rachkowski. I'm a member of the Town of Waterford Plan Commission and have the privilege to serve with these gentlemen here on the working group that is in the process of drafting the cooperative boundary plan that we're going to talk about tonight. The subcommittee that you're going to hear from tonight and is going to listen to the input that you all have for us. Our purpose within this process is to draft the boundary plan that will ultimately go to the municipal boards, the town board and the village board, for approval before it is then moved forward to the state. We'll talk a little bit about that process tonight. This is not the group that ultimately has decision-making rights on whatever is moved forward. That is ultimately in the hands of the town and the village boards. So this meeting tonight is primarily an opportunity for the community to learn about, to ask questions, and to provide input to this group here tonight on this process. That's what we're here for. We're hoping that this is going to be the first of several such meetings that we have the opportunity to hold as we're putting this together. So we're going to have a short presentation just to lay some foundational pieces of this, and then we're going to shift to really the main purpose for this meeting, which is the Q&A and the input that we hope to hear from you and from those who are attending this meeting online. So a couple things, just logistics-wise for this meeting. We have those of you who are in the room here, and we also have opened up an online meeting. So there are going to be, hopefully, there'll be folks online that will have the opportunity to participate as well. As I go through the presentation at the front end here, if you have questions, I would ask that you just please hold those until the Q&A portion of the meeting, and then we'll get to them and hopefully be able to address them then as well. For those of you who are online, if you're attending the meeting online, I'd ask that you please mute your mics unless you're speaking. We are going to take comments from both folks in the room and those online. Online attendees can submit their questions via the chat feature in the online meeting, and we'll pick those up. And you'll also have the opportunity to voice your questions if you have them online as well. The meeting is being recorded here in the room. The online meeting is not being recorded. We don't have that feature available to us, but we are recording the meeting. This is not a publicly noticed meeting, so we are not taking minutes for this meeting, but it is being recorded. Those of you who saw the announcement that went out about a month ago announcing this meeting may have noted that there was a special purpose email inbox set up for questions that could be posed to us before the meeting. We only got one. It came in like within the last 24 hours, so there is one out there that we will look to get at. And then the last thing is, as I go through the slides, anyone who is interested in getting a copy of the slides after the meeting, if you just send an email message to that special purpose email box, boundary plan or Waterford boundary plan at gmail.com, we'll send you a copy of the slides. And without further ado, I also want to offer a huge thank you to Andrew Carter from the high school. He's in the back. He's running the show here in terms of all the technology and the online meeting. So Andrew, we really appreciate you being here for us tonight. All right, real quickly, what are we going to cover tonight? We're going to go through real briefly what is a cooperative boundary plan in the first place. We're going to talk about why are we doing this. You know, Adam opened today with a really tough topic, some sad news that affects the entire community. This process that we're going to talk about tonight is all about community, our community, the Waterford community, us together, and building a plan for the future together. Community is a dominant theme, and it runs the course of everything that this group really feels as we work together and have been collaborative. So real quickly, before I do that, I missed something, which is actually introducing, or having these gentlemen introduce who they are. You may know them, but I'll go real quickly down the line, Adam, if you want to start.
I am Adam Jaskey, Village Waterford Trustee.
I am Don Houston, Village Waterford President.
Doug Schwartz, Town of Waterford Supervisor. Dale Garkey, Town of Waterford Supervisor.
Thanks, guys. I apologize for missing that piece. Sorry. All right, so we're also going to talk about why are we doing this? Community and planning for our community is a big element of that. But there are a number of benefits associated with it. This is a Wisconsin state process, and we're going to talk about the standards that the state holds up that will look at whatever is moved forward by the municipal boards to the state. There is a lens that they look at and evaluate what we bring forward to them, and we're going to talk about what their standards are. We'll talk about our group, the working group's progress to date, and our key learnings to date. And then we're going to turn it over to the main purpose of this meeting, which is really hearing from all of you. All right, so what is a cooperative boundary plan? This is essentially a tool defined by Wisconsin law for neighboring municipalities to work together in planning their future, typically their long-range future. It is a process. It's a long-range, collaborative, proactive territorial planning process. That's really the essence of what it is. It is designed to bring municipal leaders and communities together to collaborate cooperatively in building that plan for the future. The outcome of this process is a detailed, hopefully, a detailed, thoughtfully planned, written agreement between the municipalities. It plans and defines their futures together. One thing I'll just offer a quick sort of opinion on this. I think the thing is poorly named, Cooperative Boundary Plan, because immediately, based on what I'm seeing and hearing and learning, is everybody focuses on the middle word, boundary. Where's the line? Where are you drawing the line? Am I in the line? Am I out of the line? Where do I sit in the line? And more importantly, who am I paying taxes to on this line and where I live, where I sit, and whatever the boundary is. We want to emphasize tonight that there's a lot more to this process. The boundary and boundary futures and boundary planning is a piece of it. There's a lot more to it than that. right, so why are we doing this? There's a number of reasons. They're summarized here on the slide. First and foremost, cooperative is the operative word here. This is designed to be a cooperative process. It's designed to reduce conflicts, reduce acrimony, reduce adversarial attitudes between communities, to cooperate together in building a plan for the future. It is intended to be proactive, to reduce ambiguity and reaction to things that happen. Designed to actually proactively plan where do these communities want to go into the future. It's a very flexible process. We're learning there's significant flexibility to this, and that as a working group, we have a lot of latitude in how we define this process and how we define the outcome of this plan and what ultimately consists of. So there's tremendous flexibility in this. Certainty. Once defined, this is a clearly defined plan that provides certainty for the future, that should eliminate more questions than it ever raises in terms of what is the intended future for where we're going. It involves broad participation. This step tonight is just one of those. Broad participation in terms of community input and other stakeholder input, both within government, regional planning commissions, and others that have the opportunity to weigh in on what is ultimately produced out of this work. It's designed to save money. Plain and simple, avoid litigation and costly expenses that are all too often experienced as communities get into reaction and adversarial kinds of disagreements about the future. This process is designed to save money, optimize services, maximize efficiencies between neighboring communities. We're hoping to drive towards those kinds of outcomes in what's produced. It's long-term. This is a minimum of 10-year plan. Likely a lot longer than that, if not permanent in terms of where this ultimately goes. And it's enforceable. At the end of the day, this is a written contract between communities that is ultimately approved by the state of Wisconsin, and if there are challenges to it in the future, it is the state that defends it. So it really drives to that point. So as mentioned, there are a set of standards, basically the lens that the state will look at anything that is brought forward from the municipal boards. And they're summarized here. There are 6 of them, but there's only 5. One of them the state has repealed and it is not applicable. But number 1, the plan needs to be sufficiently detailed. This is a fairly well detailed process. And there are many of these plans that have been developed by communities across the state of Wisconsin that are available out online, and you can look at them, you can read them, you can see how detailed they are. But the state will look at how detailed is the plan. Does it answer questions, not raise them? The plan needs to be consistent with the comprehensive long-range land use plans that have been put in place by the municipalities that are working on it. So the long-range comprehensive plan, land use plan for the town, for the village, there's got to be consistency in what is produced here with what those plans actually say. The plan has to provide adequate, or it has to cover adequate provision for municipal services. Essential services to the community and how they will be provided has to be defined in this plan. Even if nothing is changing relative to the way that they're provided today, it has to be covered in this plan. The 5th one there is a big one, and we've already had a number of conversations about this. Compactness of territory, going back to the borders themselves and where municipal borders are actually laid out within the plan. The state is going to look at something called compactness, which we're still learning about, but at the end of the day, essentially means you can't draw boundaries that go willy-nilly off here or there and everywhere and do not create a compact, cohesive, defined legal entity in terms of its territorial boundaries. So there's a big element of that. You can't create islands of a town that live within, completely surrounded by village boundaries and that kind of stuff. So that is a standard that the state is going to look at and assess us on as well. And then the planning period needs to be consistent with the cooperative plan, which is essentially is minimum of 10 years, likely much longer than that, depending upon how we define that. So I talked about this isn't only boundaries. Boundaries is the thing that gets a lot of attention, but it isn't the only thing. These cooperative boundary plans involve, yes, municipal boundaries and a planning for future municipal boundaries. But it also involves revenue sharing to make sure that there is a wholeness, a fiscal wholeness across the communities that are involved in putting this together. It speaks to and can speak to things like utilities, infrastructure, extensions and futures, water, sewer, other physical infrastructure that serve these communities. What are the intended futures and what's being planned for that infrastructure, as well as services and how services will be provided. And it has the opportunity to look holistically at how the governments of these municipalities are run and organized and what they cost and so forth, and look for opportunities to drive efficiencies, cost savings, and optimize those services across the community boundaries. So the state does, on its website, provide a high-level flow chart for what the process is. I kind of hesitated in terms of whether or not we were going to put this in here tonight. We chose to put it in, but it probably raises more questions than it answers, because the state's notes on the bottom there, it actually leaves out a lot of the process. Suffice it to say that we're kind of up in the upper left-hand quadrant of this thing right now. That's where this working group is working right now. We have drafted no cooperative boundary plan at all. There is nothing on paper yet. We felt it was more important to hear from the community and get input first before we start and get too far ahead of ourselves on anything. So there's nothing on paper yet. There's nothing that's gone to the boards in terms of any kind of draft recommendations or anything yet at this point. All right, so our progress to date, what's been done? So the process starts with the municipalities passing authorizing resolutions saying that they're going to enter into this process. Both the village and the town have done that. It next forms a working group, which is the 5 of us here who have the responsibility to collaborate together and draft probably multiple iterations of what the ultimate boundary, the boundary plan that will ultimately go to the boards for decisioning on it. So the working group has been formed, and we've been meeting regularly since the middle of September. This is a collective learning on this process and on the terminology. None of the 5 of us are experts in this process. We're learning as we're going along, and there's been a lot of learning as we've gone through this up to this point. We've talked about and begun to consider what is going to be in the scope of this boundary plan. To the things that I pointed out on the previous slide, the scope can be pretty big. What are we going to include in that? We haven't made any decisions on it, but we're talking about those things. We've established a relationship with the state. The state provides an opportunity for a consultant, a mediator, someone, an unbiased party from the state to come alongside this working group and advise us to answer questions that we have about the process, about what we can do, what we can't do, what's been done in the past. So we have that relationship established, and that individual has been working with us in some of our meetings. One of the things that we did, to the point earlier about aligning this plan with the comprehensive land use plans from the respective communities, we've looked at the comprehensive land use plan of record from both the town and the village. We put them side by side, and we've looked at them, and quite frankly, we're seeing more similarities than dissimilarities between those land use plans. That's an important thing to inform our process and our decisioning about where we go in the future. We've also updated both the town and the village boards on our progress at their October and their November meetings. And we have planned and scheduled and are now holding this listening session to hear from the community in this process. All right, so what are our learnings and what are our agreements? We've clarified some terminology. We feel we have a better understanding of some of the key terminology that can be involved in these plans. Things like trigger parcel, town island, TIF district, stuff that some of us didn't know anything about really coming into this process, but we're learning about them. The five of us firmly agree that ongoing bi-directional communication with the community is vital to the success of what this is going to produce. We have to have that, and hopefully tonight's meeting is a start to that. To that end, we also recognize that inaccurate, incomplete information is the bane of this thing. And there is that out there. It's not a well-understood process, and what we're driving at is not necessarily well understood. So we're going to try to communicate as openly, honestly, clearly as we possibly can throughout this process, because if we don't, that's a big risk to success. Participation and input from the DOA mediator is welcome, and it's helpful, and we're going to continue to leverage that. The comprehensive land use plans are more similar than dissimilar, and I would encourage any of you who don't have those necessarily memorized to take a look at them side by side and see what we've seen. We feel that consistent, regular, and timely updates to both municipal boards are important. We're going to continue to do that, and we're going to update the boards with the same information at the same time, so that they're not hearing different pieces of the progress story from different representatives. It's going to be the same message. And at the end of the day, this is likely to take some time. Okay, it just is likely to take some time. This is a long-range planning process. It's not a quick fix to anything, but it is a considerably important process that we've embarked upon here. So that's the foundation that we wanted to lay for you all today. And now we're going to switch gears to really the main purpose for this meeting, which is to hear from you, your questions and your input to this process. So we're going to start with the group in the room here. We ask that you please come up to the mic and state your name and your address and provide your input if you can. We don't know how many folks are going to want to speak, so if you can limit it to just a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes of input, that would be great. And then we're also going to take questions from the online attendees as well. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to you all. Thank you.
I live at 29308 Forest Isle Lane in the town of Waterford. First question, ultimately, who's going to make the decision about the ultimate agreement should it be reached for the boundary district? Is it going to be each board? Is there a governing body over that's going to determine it? How is that going to be determined? Or how do you envision it's going to be? Because I know you don't have all the answers right now.
I can answer. First of all, it has to be approved by both boards.
Okay.
What the draft we bring, or maybe they don't like it, might have to come back for another draft to this board. But the final draft has to be approved by the village board and the town board and the state.
The state also has to be involved in the approval.
Yes.
Ultimately, the state is the final authority on what is approved.
Thank you. The next question I had was, the elephant in the room has been the issue that during the period of time where there was an attempt to try to incorporate in the town to be the village of Michigan, the question was always that there was an annexation concern, that the village was trying to annex property from the town or vice versa in this whole process. And that's the kind of talk we've heard in the community. I would love to hear anyone speak to how this process will help clarify that in advance so that it doesn't become a question mark in people's mind, but it's predetermined.
Can I just start about, first of all, the annexation process. Is village doesn't initiate the annexation process whatsoever. The annexation process is initiated by the property owner. Period. That's how the process works. It is not a municipality going to say, this is gonna be in the village, this is gonna be in the town. It's not how the process works. So, just to make that clear, that's how annexation works. If somebody wants to, and even with this, kind of dispel a couple rumors and stuff that's out there, if you've got a farmland that's, piece of farm that's, or a piece of land, whatever, that's next to the village, or you think that, oh, this could be part of this map, you can farm that land for the next 10 generations if you want. Just because it's in this map it's not gonna change your use.
Okay, and by the way, I'm almost done, I promise. I just, but a couple more I wanted to get out there to maybe help the room also and get it started. How do you see this assisting the infrastructure questions that have existed? Because you have got the town, you have got the village. There's a boundary discussion which is trying to be a mutual agreement between the two entities, yet we have got fire services, we have got police services, we have got DPWs, we have got all these other services that frankly could probably be merged, and you start talking about cost savings and opportunities. It would be interesting to hear, will that be a part of the conversations? I know you can't answer it all tonight, but will that be a part of the conversations when it comes to what we hope to accomplish?
Yes, that's gonna be part of the discussion to try and look at how we can combine our services. The other thing on the last question, even though you might be in whatever the map is designed in the village, like Don said, doesn't mean you're gonna be, you still have to petition. Doesn't mean if you're in that map that you're paying taxes the next year to the village, you're still gonna be in the town. Like you said, you do have to petition the village to become part of the village. If you're outside that map, unless both municipalities agree, that there is not gonna be any more arguing about annexation then.
Interesting. Last question, I'm off the stage here. Have you done research, or, excuse me, is a part of the process doing research to other municipalities or groups that have done this to specifically gauge and get what were the results that they experienced both pre, during, and post the actual execution or implementation of the process? Please.
If I could go back to the last question, no, because I want to give you some clarification and anybody else who's listening and wondering. My personal opinion is if we are going to spend the time to do this and do this the right way, all the things you described, and there's a whole list more of shared, everything should be discussed in this committee. And I think as Don was talking about, if that gets sent back to both boards, and those boards feel different about something, then they can kick that back to this committee. If we're gonna do it, everything should be discussed. The next question was, anybody else's boundary agreements have we looked at or done any research on? I've started spending a lot of time, a lot of them are posted online through the state.
Good.
So anybody here can do it, anybody at home can do it. We would welcome you guys to do that, people to do that. Send us your pros, send us your cons, send us what you think might work, what might not work. There's a lot of them out there. I do believe our attorney at the village, Stan, is also, he's got a lot of ones that he has worked on and has provided us to look at, or would provide anybody those documents to look at. So I personally started, I think some of the others on the committee have started looking as well. There's a lot to look at.
I suspect that a large part of this is going to be the ability to effectively communicate in a very transparent manner the messages that you are all collaboratively working on, because honestly, that has been the biggest concern that has existed within the residential community, has been he said, she said, we said, they said. And at the end of the day, nobody really knew what the story was. So
Greg, that's why we're here tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could follow up on one thing, the county executive, speaking of shared services, has a committee that's looking at countywide EMS, maybe setting up fire districts. I believe Doug Schwartz is a member of that committee, so another group is also looking at that portion of services countywide.
Who's next?
I'll go. I feel like I'm at a dissertation. Okay, Andrew Ewart, 66 Woodland Circle, and at one time 30303 Beachview Lane in the town. So, as a citizen, as you guys are doing this, I grew up in northern Illinois, Lakeville, Antioch, Channel Lakes area, very much like how this area was 20 years ago. Now when you go down there, it's very condensed. It's not that country feel that I grew up in that I love. I could ride my dirt bike to 5 different towns in that area. Can't do that now. So what I'm asking you guys, as you look at this, as we move, as this grows, from the epicenter of the village, I want to see lot sizes get bigger as we move out. I do not want to see smaller lot sizes as we go out into the country. I'd like to see hobby farms. I'd like to at least see a 1/3 acre in the village as we move out. I think you can put your condensed starter homes more by the schools, Trailside and Woodfield have that area available to put starter homes in. But as we move out, I really want to keep that country feel, and you guys have the opportunity to keep that country feel. I think that's why we all moved out here. And I think we can keep it that way, as we can have our starter homes, but as we move out, I'd like to see that country feel stay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that. First of all, that's the reason I moved out here too. I didn't wanna live in the city, not to mention the water. And we do not wanna, we don't wanna be at Burlington, we don't wanna be even McGuanago, we wanna be Waterford. I mean, that's the reason why everybody's here. We wanna do what makes sense for this community, and that kinda sums it up. It's all about planning and what should go where. You don't put a industrial next to a school, or vice versa. You gotta do what makes sense for the community as a whole, and that's why we're here getting this boundary agreement together.
And I think both the village and the town's master plan does what Mr. Ewart was asking, that, the farther out you go, the larger the lots are. Hobby farms are in your, master plan. And, I hate to throw a grenade out there, but Trailside School was supposed to be low density development for the land near Trailside, and to me, that's really high density, so sorry about that, but I just had to throw that out there.
Any online questions?
Andrew, do we have anything from online?
Just that they couldn't hear initially, and that problem was solved. As of right now, no questions. Anybody that's attending virtually, you have any questions currently that either you would like to throw in chat or raise your hand to speak in the room?
How about that one question that was in our email box? And they did say, awesome job, Andy.
I think that was for the question and not for my microphone skills.
Let's see if I can bring that up here. All right, I think we may have already touched on this one, but Mike Sossaman asks, can the village annex town land without the property owner's consent, other than the town willingly allowing that annexation? I live in the border, and my concern is being absorbed in the village where they don't listen to the people of the village and taxes are higher than the town's. I just built a home and purposely built it in the town. I'm not up to be absorbed in the current plan, but seeing how I'm right on the border, I feel my concern is valid.
I think we answered that a little bit. Even if the border would change, he still would have to petition to be into the village. Otherwise, he would still be in the town.
Correct.
And that's one of the big things out there. I've talked to people, they say, come on, whatever map you come up with, if I'm inside that line, I'm gonna be in the village. No, you're not.
Yes. And I think, Doug, just to build on that, you've also raised a couple good point a couple times in our meetings together around, it's almost the reverse of that concern, that when this plan is put together, if you have landowners that for some reason in the future have a desire to actually be in the village, that, you know, they may not have that opportunity based upon how this plan gets laid out. So, you know, that's why we have to be very thoughtful and intentional about where we're putting things and how it's laid out. But this notion that we're gonna draw lines and that's just gonna automatically absorb landowners into someplace they don't wanna be, that's not how this process works.
I guess I just have one quick question, because I want to clarify that.
Okay.
Because I hear what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense that a landowner would have to petition to be in the village. Let's use Mike Sosson, I know exactly where he lives. There's some farmland around him, and the farmer might decide, hey, I want to subdivide this, and we want to put in a subdivision here, and want to be part of the village. All of a sudden, all the land around his property is the village. He's probably gonna get taken into the village along with that. You can't just have one house in the middle of the village that's part of the town. And that's the concern that I think some people have.
That's true.
And that is a valid concern, that is that we've wrestled with that, that's the notion of something called a town island.
Yes.
Right, and I look at that, you know, well, John Gomez, 515B, Foxmead Crossing. So I live in the village, but I own, or I'm a partner in a business that's in the town. And that could happen to us. I mean, we're kind of just like a little finger sticking into the village right now. And it wouldn't take very much to make us a town island. And that's kind of where or at least my concern is, and I'm trying to get a feel for what's happening and what's going on there.
Actually, yours wouldn't be a town island, because you would still, I believe you're bordered on Waterford Woods, and that's still in the town.
That still is, but, and this is all hearsay, but you hear that there's movement to move the woods to the village, and I just wanna make sure that.
First of all, there's been none of that.
We don't want the infrastructure.
The only, the properties with growth that we've looked at and the village has looked at in the past in the map is basically the empty farmland around.
Right.
Around the village. And
Okay.
it's more of the property owners, truthfully, it's all about money. I mean, look at the DeGrave property, they got more than 25 grand an acre because they were able to get water and sewer and smaller density and stuff to be coming to the village. That's bottom line. It's about the property owner being able to kind of cash out on that, and you're right about the islands.
Yeah, so to summarize it, what you're really talking about then, and what the village is looking for, is you're looking at places where there might be some farmland that wants to be developed as part of the city, as part of the village.
Correct. We're part of this we're looking at on this plan is where we have infrastructure. We have water and sewer right there, like at Walgreens
So
or
it's
whatever.
easy to just.
So it's easy to do. Nobody wants to spend money to take infrastructure up to 83, way up 80. It just doesn't make sense. It's
Okay.
where it makes sense to develop, where we have the infrastructure there and where you can have these services, like we all mentioned.
And one of the things that, just to build on Don's point, I mean, the town island possibility is a real one, and we appreciate you bringing that forward. That's a great point. As we're looking at this, we want to try to minimize the potential for those kinds of things happening. And that's, are you gonna completely eliminate it? Maybe not, but you wanna try to minimize the potential of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Thanks for the question.
I'm Opera Dexter. I live at 208 North Fifth Street in the Village, but my family, my sister owns property that just borders the village right across from Trailside. So she owns the property on top of the gravel pit, and she also owns property that goes from the top of the hill down to the river. And then, the part that borders the degrade development, across from Trailside. Town Island is a big concern for us because that is there's one small bit of property that prevents an island being created. And that's, on the riverside of North River Bay Road. And our concern is that, as of right now, I went today to look, and the Anderson Real Estate Group still has that property listed. And it has it as a 77+ acre property, including a gravel pit and water access. So, from what I understood, that strip is town on the one side of, on the riverside of North River Bay Road there. That's town. The other side is annexed now as part of the degrade development. That part was annexed, 69 acres or so, I think it is. Is there anything, I know nothing is certain in the world, but our concern is if for some reason the development does not go through, that property is sold, the people want to annex that little town. If they do that, my sister's property, Schrader's property, and the old Lunau property would become a town island. So is there, anything that prevents that? I don't know what's gonna happen with that little strip of land, but that's just our concern.
I can give you my opinion, is that little strip of land is, the way this development was separated, that strip of land stayed in the town. So those houses would all stay in the town
But it's not listed, like, the Anderson website does not list part of the parcel as village, or part of the property for sale as village, and part as town.
I don't know what the Anderson website is, but the property it did not create an island.
Not yet, yeah.
It did not.
No,
Those properties along the river are still in the town.
yeah. So
Even the
it's-
ones on Oak Lodge Road are still in the town.
Yeah,
Well, that's North River Bay going up that way.
yeah. So as long as
Like
they,
Oak Lodge, yeah.
so there's not a chance, I wanna say, that somebody could do that. If they asked to annex, if somebody purchases that property and asks to annex,
You mean that one sliver of land?
yeah, because,
Who
like,
knows? I don't know.
I think based on, and I'm less familiar than probably these gentlemen are, but based on what you're describing, it would not seem right for us to sit here tonight and say, well, there's no
yeah, I
possibility
was trying to say
of
there's no
that.
absolute certainty, but,
We can't tell you that, but that would create a town island, and that would be, lack of better terms, a mess.
well, cause I'm already.
That's the reason why that property was left alone.
We're already concerned about how the infrastructure for the new development is going to go, because is it going to circumvent that trail side, up the Old Loomis Road
It
there?
goes along Milwaukee Street.
Old Loomis.
Old Loomis.
So then, it'll go
The
on my
infrastructure.
sister's property, they'll be doing construction and stuff right through, they're gonna do
It's
it
all
right
in,
through the
it's
school.
all in the right of way,
It's gonna be through Trailside, I believe the school
Yeah.
board okayed it, so it's not gonna be, the road is gonna be through Trailside.
Okay,
so they don't have to disrupt traffic and stuff.
So it'll be on the opposite side of the road from your property.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
If I can throw one thing out, and maybe the rest of the committee here can correct me if I'm misspeaking, but my understanding from what Eric Schmidtke from the DOA told us when we had him on the phone one day is that if both municipalities agree, perhaps an island could be left.
But he did say for a portion of time.
You should have frowned on it.
It wasn't what they wanted.
Right, right, but it
We
wouldn't.
don't know how it's gonna end.
Yeah.
But
A big question that we have is how the state is gonna apply those standards to whatever we bring forward to them. And yes, Dale, you're right, we did touch on that with them. I'm kind of where Don is, that I think it was, if a town island were to be created, the cooperative boundary plan could provide, parameters in which, timing, how long can a town island exist, what opportunities does a property owner who might be an island have within the context of this process going forward. So I think we've got a lot more learning to do on that yet. Andrew, was there a question online?
Yeah, we've got 2 questions online.
Okay.
Maureen Sandin asked, how will the village's 20-acre parcel and the ETZ come into play with the boundary agreement? Question is in the chat on the screen here, if I can.
I believe once a boundary agreement is in effect, it limits the extraterritorial jurisdiction.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. I don't have it all memorized, but I think it limits
that's right.
extraterritorial
Yes.
jurisdiction. So once we work this out, it should solidify at least our time here and probably on this earth.
Second question here, just give me a sec here. How is the village's extraterritorial ordinance limiting subdividing town border land to, okay, never mind, that's on, I think, kind of the same question. If you guys just wanna double check here. Just bring that up as best we can.
I think we answered that already.
Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah,
I think
basically,
it's the same
more
question, I
details
just
on
wanna
the
make sure
answer
that
that.
The same question, once this is all taken care of and solidified.
Should answer all those disputes and questions.
Yes.
That's our goal.
I wanna make a quick comment on this. Okay. So my feelings on this question here from Carolyn Johnson is, I and the subcommittee here have spent hours discussing some of the prior, and this is gonna probably cause issue for me, but the prior mistakes that both municipalities have made and things that they went forward on. And we've discussed that at length. I don't think there was anything positive of decisions from both municipalities. This is a big part of this process, is to try to correct some of that. I do definitely agree that the village of Waterford should not be telling people in the town of Waterford what they should be doing or not doing, and vice versa. And the second part of that question is, I wanna make it very clear to this group and to everybody listening at home that the village administrator does not speak for me, does not speak for President Houston, these 3 other gentlemen, or anybody else on the village board. The village administrator speaks for himself, and his actions are his actions. At the end of the day, we as a village board make the decisions. And what I just started this by saying is, some decisions that are made are not always the correct decisions. And that can be said for both municipalities, and every municipality for that matter across the country. So I am giving my time at, I think I broke it down, 3.3 cents an hour to get this done for the betterment of both of the communities. I think everybody else is gonna echo that.
Right, we can't change what has happened, we have to
Yeah,
go forward.
that
That's
is-
why we're trying to get together
Correct.
and work together on stuff, so we don't have these disputes anymore.
So
And
we
it's not
have,
gonna be overnight, it's gonna take some time to get this.
so we have a plan showing what can happen, and we can plan our infrastructure. We don't have roads that are dead ending, like in a Fairview subdivision where the town stops and the village starts. It makes no sense, but we've gotta have a plan here where the roads fit together. Look at Riverside Road, where there's a garage built, Riverside Road stops, then there's a garage, then it starts over here a block away. Stuff like that is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to set this out where planning for the future, that's the whole idea here. Whether it be infrastructure, whether it be services, and, on down to what's being where. That's the idea, as, look at the area as a whole, as one community.
And there's an underlying assumption I think all five of us have, is that looking forward, we are better together than we are separate, in terms of trying to figure out what's the best chart forward for the future of this community overall.
Come on down.
Tanya Meany, 6911 Big Bend Road. So, when the town was trying to incorporate, I did a ton of research. And what I had discovered, and I wanna put this in context, so I'm bringing this up. What I had discovered was that the state had set up towns and villages with a very specific purpose in mind. Towns were to be holding areas, right? So that the villages could slowly grow so that, you know, they're not falling into bankruptcy or they're not growing too fast or whatever like that, all right? Then eventually the idea being, you know, they grow enough where then the town and the village would then become one bigger village or city, right? So keeping that in mind, some of the things that were brought up here about the boundary agreement, that I'd like maybe explained from a landowner's perspective. If that initial standpoint from the towns are holding areas for a village to grow, then the purpose of a boundary agreement, especially when up here, it had showed that if it's 10 years, you were saying, or it could be perpetual, eternal.
50.
Or it says eternal, right, just never ending. How is that, and then it also said up here that this benefits the landowner. But if it's putting, the landowner, some landowners in a place where, no, they don't have a choice where they wanna go, if they want to, go here or go there, what they wanna do. So could you explain how a potential perpetual boundary agreement would be beneficial to the landowner, and how this plays into that original vision that the states had for how towns and villages actually are supposed to work?
I'll take that, you know, the idea that towns are holding zones maybe was more true 50 or 100 years ago when, you know, towns had a constable and, you know, volunteer firefighters and had no services. But today, the only thing we don't have that the village has is municipal water. We actually have police services to the village. So, you know, we're an urban township. We're not a rural township anymore. We are an urban township with village powers. So I think the notion that towns are simply holding zones isn't really accurate. And if you look at our town land use plan, you can see that all the land up until the boundary of the village does have potential for development. So if somebody were to say, well, if my farm doesn't come into the village, then I have to farm forever. No, not necessarily. You could still have larger lots if a plat was approved in the town. Just look at the difference between Kettle Glen, which are smaller lots, and Hickory Hollow or Bayside, where you have acre lots. Talking about, you know, larger lots as you go farther away from the village. So there are other options for everybody, whether they're in the village or the town, other than just farming forever. So that's my thoughts.
Sometimes the economy, supply and demand is gonna drive this. Obviously, if it doesn't make dollar-wise sense, selling a 3-acre lot, if they can't make money, the developer, whatever, they're not gonna do it. I mean, it's just all in the appetite of the buyer, the developer, who's building that house, who sees the potential. I mean, that's really the bottom line. if there's no economic sense for that farmland to be subdivided, in other words, that farmer can't cash out or make money, it's not gonna happen. And, or vice versa. The other way, it might be full lots, but, yeah, I mean, the town doesn't have sewer either in certain parts of it, but anyway, you get my point. We don't know what's gonna happen in the future. We don't know what the economy's gonna be. So that's gonna kinda drive it, and that's stuff that we have to look at, as looking at this plan, because this is gonna be potentially way after us, you know, so.
So I guess that's kind of my point, is that, what you're doing is you're setting this up for very long term, and none of us knows, but at the end of the day, at the root of it should be not taking away landowners' rights, no matter how far down the road that is. So, and I respectfully, I get that, that was written obviously a long time ago, but that doesn't make it any more, crucial. I think when we change what the original intent was, then we tend to set up scenarios that, with a lot of unintended negative consequences, you start to have a lot of small villages all next to each other that now can't grow together, and you then set up these islands where now there's competition, and again, when you come into a scenario like we have now, where we need to be sharing services, we need to be coming together and not becoming our own little islands. And so that should be prevented as much as possible. So when you're setting up the boundary agreement, I think we still need to remember the original intent of this was, because I don't feel that, changing the intent, really brings much benefit.
Well, a couple other things there, one of the standards is compliance, so if somebody who owns a farm, 2 miles away from the village wants to annex in, the DOA wouldn't allow that because it would be too far away. And there are also limits to the village's service providing ability too. We were told at one of our meetings that second floor bathrooms in Fairview subdivision barely have enough water pressure to shower. So how much farther can you push sewer and water, in any direction, whether it's in the water in the village or sewer, they're gonna be adding on to Western Racine County Sanitary District. They have limits, they will have limits even with an addition. So development can't occur forever. But there has been discussion of maybe someday the town and the village will say, hey, let's become a 4th-class city. That was discussed by the group, so that is a possibility somewhere down the road. Even with a perpetual agreement, if somewhere down the road, both boards, majority of both boards get together and say, hey, maybe it's time to look at becoming a city, that still would be a possibility, so.
I mean, let's be honest, the biggest concern town residents or village that I hear is taxes. I don't want to pay village taxes. Like, I see everybody shaking their head, it's exactly right. But let's get realistic, that might change in a couple of years, but we never know. And that's, I'm just making that point. That might not be forever either, as times change.
I think to go back to your part of your question about the length of a boundary agreement. If anybody wants chirping, go ahead, but I don't think we've ever really even kicked around length at this point. Threw out a couple of things initially, but I think we need to craft a lot of the other things that Tom went through and kind of some of the things you were just talking about. Because I think that kind of coincides with what the length should then be. Because like when you do look at our master plans, some of these things that you look at, they're not going to happen 30, 40, 50 years unless there's this influx of something that changes in the way we all go about our daily lives. So I don't think we necessarily are anywhere near a point where we feel comfortable with any length of a term. And just something about like property owners, it is an interesting process because you do also hear from the people who don't want to be in a potentially new map because of the fear of having, at some point, maybe they're annexed in by, you know, they pass away and their children do kind of like the degrades. They make a change that maybe the parents wouldn't have agreed with because the opportunity's there. There are also people that voice the opposite, and they say, I want the opportunity to be in a new map for the pure fact that I don't have to annex in tomorrow, I don't have to annex in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. I can annex in and when I want to annex in. And that provides an opportunity for generational decisions on that property, whether it be their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. So it's a difficult thing because you come up potentially with this new boundary, and we're talking about islands and different issues like that, but there's people who say, you're just leaving me out. I want that opportunity. And that's not talked about a lot. So it's a lot in the salad bowl currently to figure out.
And I just wanted to throw that out there again for.
Yep.
Good input.
Yep.
Thank you.
But I'll tell you personally, I agree, I do not wanna say this will be forever. We don't know what's gonna happen in 50 years, or 70 years, or even tomorrow, truthfully. But forever's, to me, that shouldn't happen. But the long term, yeah, I mean, we're not, it's gotta, 10 years don't make any sense. We gotta have something we can plan for, but forever's, to me, that's wrong for the next generations. So, that's just my personal opinion.
One thing I learned in this process, and I'm assuming you guys did as well, is whatever agreement may become a true agreement approved by the state at whatever point, that is also open to be amended by the two municipalities that go into that agreement, whoever those current elected officials are at that time. So if something down the road, and we've talked about this, about what fell into a map potentially, Dale, you especially about the size of development in certain spots, that at some point, if that were to change or something drastically changed in the view of that spot that did not fall in that initial boundary agreement, those municipalities would have to come back to the table and they would have to agree upon that and the state would have to approve that. I think that's a very important thing to remember, that just because something is in an agreement for 10 years or 100 years does not mean that that is set in stone forever. There are ways to amend, there are ways to change based on who holds those seats at that time and is willing to do that.
Another question in chat, Carolyn Johnson, sorry, but I do not believe my question was answered. Why is the village purposely in limiting landowner rights? I fully understand the history of the boards, that ordinance will be gone with the border agreement, and that Zeke doesn't speak to the board, why the board? Why can't I subdivide my 19 acres, you have to agree with a quarter acre, lot up across the road from?
I felt,
We're here to talk.
Caroline, if you're listening, I felt I answered it personally the best that I could answer it, so if there's something else you wanna clarify that I said, if you want, I would try. I answered it how I could answer it and how I feel about it, so if anybody else wants to, that's up to you or not.
Well, what? I don't want to answer it.
Yeah.
We're doing this for planning for the future, and we're trying to fix some of these problems, that's why we're all here. And concerns. We've met a lot. We were meeting once a week there for a while, Phil. The holidays, Thanksgiving and stuff came up. We put a lot of time in this already, and we know it's gonna take a lot of time. And, this is our time. We're volunteered to do this. It's not like we get paid by the hour or anything like that. Just the opposite.
So other input, we want to respect everyone's time this evening and not let this go longer than it needs to. If there's other voices we need to hear from, please come forward or post them online.
Or if they have a question later on, they can always email our email box.
that we gotta,
Absolutely. Please use the email box. We'll be monitoring that continually going forward.
our goal is while we're here.
And I think any misconception, I think that came up earlier, about certain things, we would like to hear about it, we need to hear about it. I think misconception is a big part of this problem. Certain pockets in the community hear certain things, and they typically end up not being factual, and not necessarily saying we have all the answers, but we wanna be able to get those answers. And we wanna be able to take your input on crafting this plan.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody, for doing what you're doing.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all for your time today. We really appreciate it. Thank you everyone online who took the time to sit in. Appreciate it.
And they can still send email?
Yep.
Okay, well, I got you guys, this is completely off topic. But I know you guys were kind of goes on with
Thanksgiving, yeah.
You're gonna roll that one out.
Oh, nice.
One of the beneficiaries were out, which would.
I've been looking at Tom for 50+ years.
Consolidated.
Can I tell you the truth? No.
We all want it. We all want it.
Your guess is good as mine.
We start talking about EMS, but that's just talk right now.
We all wanna work together, but.
We all want it.
It's not gonna, your jam, it's not gonna be before the jam test.
I mean, it's still, it wouldn't matter if they each get a third of what we did last year, that's money that they didn't have.
Since I've been on the board.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
I would say,
I always feel like I want to keep that, fix that gap. Because then they'll be working together.
I think it's a great idea and a great thing.
I think it's a great idea. Trust me, it totally makes.
It would have to be an act of God for it to come together before Jam Fest. Budget.
The other
That's great. There's a lot out there, right? Good.
Yeah, I mean, we're never gonna run out of house.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for asking questions.
Or not.
He's done.
Actually, it makes me feel better.
No, I'm not gonna give that to
I thought it was great.
That's the reason why it's set up like this. The village has no desire to take.
Because I think